Well, a big Shabbat Shalom to all of you today, to all those joining on the live stream, and also to those that are watching the video. And big Shabbat Shalom to you. Welcome to the river. Today, we are continuing our series through this wonderful book of First Timothy. And today we're actually going to look at the requirements of those that wish to serve. As you can see the title today, but I want to serve, I want to serve. And there's various drivers as to why one would wish to serve. But again, as we're beginning to see that it is his house, it is his plan of redemption, he is the author of our faith, and he has an order as to how he wants to do things. So before we jump into today's teaching, I want to recap as to what we did last week. Last week was actually one of my favorite topics to teach on, the fall of man, because once you start to understand what went down in the garden, you kind of understand how we ought to behave as a body, all these things. You start to really understand why, into the essence, actually, of the plan of redemption itself. So we saw that we're actually to pray for the peace of our captors, that we may live out our faith and be a light to those around us. We saw that, when Judah was in captivity with Babylon, Jeremiah said, pray for the peace, for the shalom of the city, because if the city you're held captive in has peace, you have peace. And Paul was really reiterating the same concept to those in the first century. And so I repeat unto you, rather than complain about what's going on, because look, what's going on around us can be grieving, but how are we going to be a light in captivity? If, we're in the prison camp, so to speak, right there, it's a lot easier to be a light right now than what we foresee life is going to be like, as we edge closer to the end of this age. And so there is a place that we are to pray for our captors, for their peace, so that we can be a light to them. Remember, Yah's not going to reward bad behavior, but what the Apostle Paul said was that the reason for this is Yah wants all to come to repentance. That's actually Yah's desire, that all would come to repentance. And so do we want to be of service, especially in this day and age? Because look, the world around us is very dark. There's a lot of madness going on. There's all kinds of issues going on. And unfortunately, vast proportions of the body are so compromised in their faith that we now have things like atheism. Where do the atheists come from? They come because of the religious people giving a bad witness. It's not the unbelievers' fault. It's the believers' fault that there's atheism, generally speaking. And so are we going to be a people that are different is really the question I want to ask people. Paul instructed us to worry about our character, not what is on the outside of the cup. The passage where, people want to make it about makeup and jewelry. And actually what Paul is saying, guys, the essence of the faith is not about all this external stuff. It's actually, do we have disputes going on? What are the relationships we have within the body like? Can we interact with brothers and sisters without causing division and offense everywhere we go? And so, unfortunately, both on the Christian and the Judeo side, it will manifest differently, but everybody's so preoccupied about the outside of the cup or the tomb, if you want to call it that. This is the image Yeshua used, and people are standing there, painting their tombs white and doing absolutely nothing about what's inside. Don't do this, don't say that, don't look like this, don't look like that. And it's like, is this really what we've made the faith about? These outward appearances, yet in the meantime, our character, we still suffer. So this is what Paul was really saying. You know, he wasn't going on to a diatribe as to whether you should be wearing pearls or gold on a Shabbat service or the lack thereof. He's saying, worry about the inside of the tomb so that the outside may be clean too. And right off the heels of that, Paul, you know, he says that his desire that the body lift up they would lift their hands that are set apart and pray, to lift undefiled hands. Now, again, these are our actions, and our actions come forth from inside. So if the inside of the tomb is being cleansed out, wonder no more why you start to act and speak different. And let's not get the horse before the cart on this issue. You know, people think that by cleaning up what's on the outside, it will help the inside, but that's not what Yeshua said. And our prayers are hindered, especially when we're in a state of quarreling and dividing the body of Messiah. So in part one of the series, we looked as to what actually causes these divisions in the body, and it was arguments over scripture. You know, this knowledge-based faith, this faith that's all based on outward appearances, no work is being done on the inside, and all it does is causes dissent into the body of Messiah. And then you wonder why the prayers are not being answered. You know, there's a proverb that says that he who does not heed the Torah, his prayers are an abomination. Now, unfortunately, in the Messianic and Judeo movement, we've made that about ticking Torah boxes, forgetting that there's a weightier matter to the law, right? As Yeshua said, you know, well, do you weigh out the mint and the cumin and the anise, but you've forgotten the faithfulness, the justice, the mercy? You know, what are the two laws that the whole Torah hangs on? Love Yah your Elohim and love your brother as yourself. And so, again, if we're in this state of quarreling, or if we're in this whitewashed faith, your prayers are being hindered. Peter would say the same. Paul says the same. The book of Proverbs says the same. Even Yeshua says the same, you know, that if you have something against your brother, don't even offer your offering. Leave it at the altar, because the inference there is that it won't be accepted. And so we have these spiritual sacrifices to offer. Are pleasing? Are they coming from a pleasing place before our King? The true faith is demonstrated by our works, and the book of Yaakov, or James, makes it very clear that this was not about ticking Torah boxes. It was actually an outward demonstration of what our character is. He uses the example of not showing partiality between the rich and the poor, which is actually exposing a character issue there. He uses Abraham not fearing man and fearing Elohim by offering up his son. You know, Isaac on the altar, his works perfected his faith. You know, in modern terms, it's like, are you willing to walk the walk instead of just talking the talk? Because there's a lot of people right now that are talking the talk, especially within the Torah movement. And again, back to chapter 1 of 1 Timothy, we're warned that these teachers, these people that think they know a thing or two, they're not even going to understand what they strongly affirm. And so this is why, you know, you have people that sound right now very convincing from behind the microphone or pulpit or whatever, you know, medium that the teachings are being given forth. And it sounds great, but actually it's lacking the minerals, shall we say. It's lacking the essence of what's behind it. A knowledge-based faith does not necessarily mean we have the good works of the faith. And so to put the mirror in our faces, just because we're ticking Torah boxes, does not mean we're actually walking in the true faith. The true faith is characterized by heart circumcision and character refinement. And this will then, when we start getting these issues right, then you watch our interactions with one another suddenly become more peaceful and joyous as an outcome. And so again, to quote Yeshua, these things you should have done without neglecting the others. It's a combination of spirit and truth. But I'm getting more and more to the place now where the spirit is the weightier matter. Paul uses the account of the garden and the fall of man to give instruction as to how the assembly ought to operate. And wonder no more as to why the enemy would go after the understanding of the account of the fall of man. Like I said last week, there are people out there, unbelievers, or even maybe agnostics, they will look at the leavened account of the Garden of Eden and the fall, and they will laugh in your face and undermine the whole scriptures because of it. Here's the thing, so they should. Because the most common understanding or interpretation of this account was given to you by Mother Rome. And so, again, you wonder no more why people make mockery. It almost beckons the question, are they really mocking the scriptures or are they mocking Mystery Babylon? And this plays into, believers versus unbelievers on Judgment Day. Whole other line of thought. But again, this is why it's critical for us to understand what really went down in the garden. Because if we don't understand what went down in the garden, we're not going to know how to operate as a wider community. Because this is what the Apostle Paul did. He used the account of the garden to say, this is how we ought to behave while in a fallen state. And if we don't understand that, why do you think, honestly ask yourself, why do you think there is so much division in the body? I can almost, if I was a betting man and you were to go to an assembly or a body of believers where there's a lot of division and you asked them their understanding of the garden and the fall of man, I almost guarantee you're going to get the Mystery Babylon account, not the true account. Funny that, eh? Women are not to teach at the assembly level, point blank. However, they are to teach the children and the less spiritually mature women. And unfortunately, in the body of Messiah, somehow teaching the assembly has become more important than teaching the children. This is, again, upside down thinking. If we were to teach the children truth, of which the woman is a key integral part, we would actually be able to, when we did get to the teachings on the Shabbat gathering at the assembly level, we could actually go a little bit deeper. Unfortunately, look, I'm going to come out and say this, there are teachings and concepts that Curtis and I wish we could go to, but we can't. Why? Because we've had the Shema broken. The Shema has not been obeyed. The children have not been taught diligently. And so again, this is not to denigrate the woman's design by saying she's not to teach at the assembly level. In fact, I would argue it's even more important, the woman's role of teaching the children, than it is the men teaching at the assembly level. Because if the family nucleus had been done properly from day dot, we could be in a whole other space at the assembly level. We would actually be a lot further ahead than where we're currently at now. And this, as the Apostle Paul said, is actually a command from the Master. He even says that if you think you're spiritual and you disagree with this, you're wrong, is what he's saying. And so, again, it's his order, it's his house, it's not ours. And these instructions were given to us so that we can have a better travail through this fallen time domain. The authority structure of men and women was already in place before the fall. And this is something that's unfortunately almost blasphemously taught in the wider body, that the idea of headship was the curse of the fall. Headship is not a curse. And in fact, I would argue the only reason we see all the good fruit in this community is because we're starting to understand that headship is not a curse. Is it a huge responsibility? Absolutely. Does it come with cost and all count the cost? Absolutely. But the fruit that would then come forth from it transcends all hardship in the moment, shall we say. Again, let's remember that Adam was formed first. He was put in charge of the garden, and then the woman was brought onto the scene before the fall of man. And so we clearly see the authority structure here. And as I mentioned as well, a woman scripturally can be referred to as a garden. And so Adam was commanded to guard the garden. So men, we're commanded right at the creation to guard the woman's design, to protect. Adam was told not if he would eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, when. He was told flat out, one day you will eat of this. You probably don't understand why now, but it would probably make sense in the future. So again, this is commonly not taught. Adam was told when he would eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he would surely die. Adam must have been the one to teach his wife the command to not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because Eve was not on the scene when Adam was told not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The woman had not been yet created. So, and this is why Paul would say that if a woman wishes to learn something, let her go to her husband. Now, what do you do with single or unequally yoked women? Curtis will address this in the discipleship series that will be the next series after the Timothy one, because right now we're focusing more on what does the scripture say, and when Curtis does the discipleship series, it will be a case of now how do we apply it in a modern world. We also saw that it was Adam that must have told Eve she was deceived, because remember what the Apostle Paul said, Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and fell into transgression. Adam was not deceived. And riddle me this, when you are deceived, do you know it? No, you don't. It wouldn't be deception otherwise. But, you know, somewhere in between Eve being deceived and Yah Elohim showing up and saying, Eve, what have you done? Somewhere in that time, Eve knows she's being deceived, because what's her response? The serpent deceived me. Well, if you're deceived, you need someone to tell you you're deceived. Adam was the only one on the scene. And so again, you start to see part of the man's role within a marriage covenant here. And this is part of the reason I'm going to say it. Well, actually, no, I'm going to repeat what the Apostle Paul said. This is why women are not to teach at the assembly level. It's not a matter of equality or intelligence. It's a matter of design. There's something about the woman's design that is prone to deception. And I would argue that part of that is to do with, I'm painting a broad brushstroke, but women are far more likely to gauge truth from their emotional state, okay? Women are very emotional creatures, and emotions do not dictate truth. Emotions just are. We're beginning to see part of the reason why Yah would create the design he did. Now, let's remember that everyone wants to focus about the shadow picture of men and women. Like, that's a shadow picture of the weightier matter. And what is the weightier matter? We're the woman spiritually, all of us, which means that guess what? We're all prone to deception. We're all prone to spiritual adultery and usurping. Like, unfortunately, when these discussions come about, like, people get stuck in the shadow picture, and to steal a saying from Curtis, they're trying to pick the fruit off the shadow tree, not the tree itself. Well, how's that going to go? It's not going to go well. And so, again, what we're looking at in regards to the design of men and women within a marriage covenant and within the assembly level, it's all pointing to something. It's not the weightier matter itself. The marriage covenant is a typology of Messiah and his bride. And the shadow picture of the assembly is a typology of the millennial reign and how that is going to operate. So again, let's not get caught up on thinking that the shadow picture is it. It's a shadow pointing to the weightier matter. Adam was not deceived. His transgression was unique from all those that would follow him. Paul states this in Romans 5:12. And so how is Adam's transgression different from all those that would follow him? Because A, he was not deceived, and B, he did it from a glorified state. Everybody else that would follow after would do it from a fallen position, being sold under sin, as Paul would say in other places. You know, who will deliver me from this body of death? The traditions of men give the adversary an avenue for deception. And so I made the point that the first tradition of woman or men or mankind, shall we say, was actually right at the garden. Eve added to the command. She said, we're not to touch the fruit. Nowhere in the command was that actually given. And so, again, let's not make this about picking on Eve or picking on women. What is the weightier the weightier matter to this? We are the woman spiritually. And look back on almost 6,000 years of history, and what is mankind known for? Adding and taking away to his word. Christianity, by and large, will chop out the front of the book and then add their own traditions. Judaism will chop out the end of the book and add all their own traditions. And so the garden is giving you a typology of what we do as a fallen humankind. And so this is why I really don't like the phrase, oh, but it's just a harmless tradition. It's not harmless, because it gives the enemy an avenue for deception. I'm just going to say it as it is. And people say, well, I'm not making it equal to Torah. Like, really? Really? The command is very clear. Do not add, do not take away. Because if not, the enemy can use that and will use that against you. This phrase, she also gave to her husband who was with her. People are always beating down on Adam because of the interpretation of the account that Mother Rome gave them regarding the fall. And they say, but Adam was right there. He was stood right beside Eve. The text does not say that. It literally, look, with her is it's a correct translation, but the Hebrew word here, ima, this word here in the Hebrew would be what's translated with her. So literally, and she gave, vatiten, gamla isha, also to her man, to her husband, ima, who was with her. And the word im is actually predominantly used of intimate relationship. We've still got this phrase, even in modern English, are you two together? Are you two like, or, oh yeah, I'm with her or I'm with him. And what we actually mean is that we're in a relationship. Even the modern English has this idiomatic speech, if you want to call it that. And this is what you're seeing in the Hebrew. It actually intimates close, intimate relationship. So when it says she also gave to her husband who was with her, it doesn't say that Adam was stood beside her. It's saying she also gave some to her husband who was intimately close with her. This is what the Hebrew is actually saying. The ground was cursed for Adam's sake. Now that you are in a fallen state, Adam, I'm going to do something to the creation that's going to help you through your fallen state. It's going to help you deal with your fallen state. It's called toil. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat bread. And, you know, again, this is why even in the modern world, well, not so modern because Rome's going down the plug hole, but even in the last 50 to 100 years, this saying, hard work breeds good character. Why? I believe there's actually a scriptural truth within that because it refines you. And so for man, the ground toil, the working and tilling of the ground, by the way, there's a discipleship allusion there, But that is what was given to the male design to deal with the fallen state. For the woman's design, she will be saved through childbearing. And so the raising of the children, which should take you back to the forward to the Shema. You know, let's remember that parents, you're to diligently teach these commands, this covenant to your children, of which the woman is a key integral part, because the man is off tilling the ground, right? Earning bread for the house. The woman would have been dealing with the children by and large. And so the man has been given his toil. The woman has been given her toil. And it's for our sake. It's to help us deal with the fallen state. And so this quote unquote curse is actually an act of love and mercy to his creation. Divorce was not an option in the beginning. Yeshua is very clear about that. Divorce was not a concept in the beginning, in the garden, which means that if Eve fell first, Adam would have been left on his own, and it's not good for man to be alone. I'm not going to rehash the implications of that. Go rewatch part 2. Too much to go through in a recap. But ultimately, what I believe the scripture is teaching is that Adam laid down his life for his bride, which would then become the typology and foreshadow of the second Adam. But let's remember, Adam did transgress. The second Adam would not. And this is all part of this great plan of redemption. And men wonder no more why Paul says that in Ephesians 5 that men are to lay down their lives for their bride. Where is Paul getting this understanding from? And are we seeing Adam enacting out the first act of faith? Because again, Adam was told one of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He wasn't told why. Do you think that Adam knew what would play out? Again, it had to be faith. It had to be faith. Elohim asks faith of us. He would have had to ask it of Adam, because Yah is not a respecter of people, even the first man. So we went through the account of the fall. And so the question I want to ask, because today we're going to look at leadership requirements for those that want to serve. And here's the question. Is it by chance that Paul goes into leadership requirements right after chapter 2? I'm going to posit that the answer is a resounding no. Paul is purposely going, right, now that now that we can address the fall of man, let's talk servant leadership. Because I'm going to make a statement here. Servant leadership truly needs to understand what went down at the fall. Because like I said earlier, when you truly understand that, you start to understand the purpose of the plan of redemption. You start to understand why the Apostle Paul would give the instructions as to how we ought to operate as an assembly in the house of Israel. And so if you don't understand look, let me phrase it this way. There's many servant leaders that may understand the what of servant leadership. Don't do this, don't do that. But what Paul is really saying is, servant leaders, do you understand the why? Do you understand why women are not to teach at the assembly level, but they are to teach the children? Do you understand why, men, you need to go and toil, or else you're going to cause division in the body, as we read in Thessalonians? Like, ladies, you need to deal with the children and help raise the family, because if not, you run the risk of being a busybody and a gossip. And this is how twisted the modern world has gotten, is that now it's really hard to tell who's who, because men can become busybodies and, men are being women and women are being men. It's awful out there what we see. And so is it by chance that Paul, right off the heels of the fall of man, he goes into leadership requirements? Absolutely not. If we don't understand the foundation to our faith, do we understand the why of our faith? You may understand the what and how to go about it, but not really know why. It would be a shame if that was the case. So I will preface this with this statement. It's very hard to go through today's teaching and not feel convicted. I was putting this teaching together, and it's one of them teachings that you serve and you read it, and it's convicting, because the Apostle Paul is literally holding a mirror to our faces, and looking in the mirror can be quite difficult. So I will preface it. So if you feel convicted, don't worry. I felt a lot of conviction putting this together. So everything I'm going to say, I've already spoken to myself first, okay? 1 Timothy 3. The word is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. And so we've been given a task. You know, think of the book of Ecclesiastes, this task that Elohim has given to man, and something noble may come out of it. We're going to break down the language behind some of these words, because we read these words in English and we gloss right over them. And this is actually a passage where the Greek does a really good job in capturing what the Apostle Paul was trying to say, because although Greek, it's not that Greek is better than Hebrew, it's different, okay? It's just a vehicle of communication, but the Greek actually does a great job in this passage. This word for noble, this noble task that we've been given, the word kalos, is really interesting because, yes, it can mean beautiful, handsome, excellent, eminent, surpassing. Now look, precious. What is precious in his sight is by doing this task of serving, of overseeing his people, will something precious come forth out of that? I'm going to go right to a weightier matter here. Is this how a bride starts to emerge from amongst his people? Beautiful to look at, shapely, magnificent. Look at this, genuine, approved, being tested by the fire. In ancient times, how would you prove that gold or silver were genuine? You'd put them through the fire, right? And so, again, this, through serving, you become proved to show that your faith is genuine. Again, joined to names of men designated by their office. Look at this, competent, able, praiseworthy, noble, morally good, honorable. And so, when Paul says that when an overseer, when someone aspires to this office, he desires a noble task, you can read this almost two ways. Do you really understand what you're getting yourself into? Would be one way of looking at it. But then let's continue. However, if you do truly understand what you're getting yourself into, something approved, genuine, and maybe even precious to our Father in heaven may come out of there. Therefore, you must count the cost. I believe this is what Paul is actually saying in this, what the English would present as a simple sentence. Like, again, what is the context of chapter 2? The fall of man. The fall of man. He's literally saying, guys, you're going to be up against all kinds of usurping. But if you can push through this, if you can understand the why, something precious to the Father will come out of this. Reads a bit differently, eh? Overseer. The Greek word here is episkope. This is where in English we get the word episcopal from. Episkope. Now look at this. It actually means to investigate, to inspect, or to visit. So think of inspecting in terms of discernment. There's actually a discernment. Now look at this. The act by which Elohim looks into and searches out the ways, deeds, character of men in order to adjudge them their lot accordingly, whether joyous or sad. This actually has the idea of you looking into something, you're rightly dividing it, inspecting it, and what you're then doing is dishing out an appropriate judgment. It's actually got judgment. Like, how are you going to act or enact something now that you've weighed up everything and discerned it correctly? This is what it actually means to be an overseer. You even get, if this is what Elohim does, are we not to imitate our Father in heaven? And so you're seeing right here that by this word, episcope, that you're actually seeing that there's a requirement for those. This is not just overseeing or being in charge or authority. You actually need to be able to be a good judge of character and motives and be able to dig into the surface and see what's really driving a situation and then give an enactment or judgment accordingly. Starts to understand why this is a noble task, right? Something precious and refined and genuine coming out of this. What's really interesting, the word episkope is, it comes from this word here, skopos. It's basically epi and skopos put together, and it makes episkope. Skopos means an observer or a watchman. Think the watchman on the towers looking out for enemies. Now, what's really interesting in the Greek, it's a dual word. It can actually mean the distant mark looked at, the goal or the end one has in view. So an overseer can actually be a goal. And so this is why I've put in the note here, there's overtones of imitate me as I imitate Messiah, as the Apostle Paul would say. Paul was an overseer within the assembly. He was imitating Messiah, and he says to Timothy, imitate me. Just as Messiah is my goal, let me point you to Messiah. It's a really interesting nuance here to this word of overseer. So what this is really saying is that you are to be Messiah-like. Messiah needs to come forth from those in servant leadership. Messiah needs to be evident in what you say, what you do, and you cannot manufacture whether Messiah is in you or not, because this is, again, an attribute of character refining and heart circumcision, which you cannot fake. If you truly have discerning eyes, you can see through the facade of someone that they may be putting up. And so what is this goal? Because Paul actually speaks about this goal in other places. This is Philippians chapter 3. Now, I've put here, the context is of throwing out the refuse or the dung, literally the garbage, of religious dogma and the traditions of men. If you go read the early, Paul says, I was a Hebrew of Hebrews, Pharisee of Pharisees, and he says, I consider it garbage for the hope that is in Messiah. That's actually the context of what we're about to read. So Paul is looking forward to a goal, and the thing that he's leaving behind, funnily enough, he doesn't talk about the struggles of the flesh or the worldliness of the world. He talks about Mystery Babylon, religion, the traditions of men, which was part of the reason that the fall of man occurred. Because remember what Eve did, she added to the command. Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind. What is he forgetting? The traditions of religion. And straining forward to what lies ahead. Not just looking forward, straining. I press on towards the goal for the prize of the upward call of Elohim and Messiah Yeshua. So this word goal here, skopos, is the root word for episkope in the Greek, which means basically an overseer. So again, Paul is looking forward to the resurrection, to Messiah, the unadulterated word of truth, which is Messiah. And he's saying to Timothy, as I look forward to that, you look to me, and together we can all go to Messiah. I press on. The word there, dioko, it means to pursue, to run after, or to persecute someone. So to press on, it's a dual word that it can mean that you're chasing something, or you're chasing someone, whether it be you're having to go through travail to do it, or whether you're doing it to put the person through travail themselves. And so I believe you're getting this idea of what Yeshua would say, narrow and hard pressed is the way to life. Now, if you do your research in the Greek in that passage, the thlebo, the crushing, is actually the same word or one of the same root family words of tribulation. The way to life is through tribulation or through toil. Toil. Again, the thing given to us to help us with our fallen state. And so Paul, when he's saying, I press on, he says, I toil. I go through the crushing, forgetting the filth of Mystery Babylon towards the goal, which is Messiah Yeshua. And so again, this word, goal, of which Messiah is the end goal, is the root word for overseer. He is the ultimate overseer of our lives, is he not? But yet he has overseers in the body that are supposed to be pointing to him. There's discipleship language in all of this. Listen to what he says. Let those of us who are mature think this way, and if anything in you think otherwise, Elohim will reveal that also to you. Look, I don't know how to say this other than to just say it. Paul is literally saying that if you're entertaining the religious traditions of Mystery Babylon, you're actually spiritually immature. So whether you're entertaining the Christian side, the Judeo, it matters not. Are you adding or taking away from his word? Are you creating your own denomination? Because look, this is the sad irony of this, is that it seems in the religious circles, the more Mystery Babylon you take on, the more mature you are perceived. And Paul's saying the opposite. He's saying if you're not forgetting what lies behind, i.e. the harlotry of Mystery Babylon, you're spiritually immature. And let Elohim reveal this to you. Hence why we need overseers in the body pointing us to the goal, which is Messiah. And overseers or servant leaders, by you doing this, you've got a hard job ahead of you. This noble task. Count the cost. Do you really know what you're getting yourself into? Because if not, you're going to experience some pain and crushing. However, something precious, genuine, and trustworthy can come out of this. And I believe that that will ultimately be his bride. We've only just done verse 1, man. Therefore, an overseer or a servant leader must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, okay? And again, we read these in the English and we gloss right over what the depth that's actually being given to you in the Greek. Look, hospitable, the Greek is, the English is fairly accurate. This, it's how you deal with others. Do you love your brother? Do you love your sister? Hospitality, that is correct. Able to teach. So here's an interesting thing I've picked up over the years. If you may know something, and you may know a lot about something, but if you can't teach it to someone else, you don't know it as well as you think you do. And I really mean that. If you can't teach something that you don't know it as well as you think you do, because it means that you don't have the ability to take something that's, say, difficult and simplify it and give it to someone else. And so this is not, I'm not condemning anyone here. It just means you have room to grow if you're not able to teach. And by the way, teaching here is not just speaking of being behind a microphone and giving the teaching. Can you be like, some people teach by apprenticeship. Some people teach by word. Do you see what I mean? Like, there's many ways to teach someone. The husband of one wife, yes, we can make the simple understanding is, I'll just say it as it is. No polygamy, guys. No polygamy. That is a very surface level understanding. But here I've put a note. Pastors and teachers usurping other husbands and causing the wives to become dependent on them as opposed to their own husbands. This is actually one of the spiritual ways or even emotional ways that this can occur. You know, unfortunately, in the Christian circles, when you will have women go to the pastor and completely sidestep their husbands in the process. Who are they really married to spiritually? Think about that. This happens on the Judeo side with the rabbi being in charge of absolutely everything. Like, again, Mystery Babylon, look no further. It's everywhere. It will sidestep the husband. And so, you know, this is why servant leaders have to be particularly careful as to how they go about things, because you can actually create or foster the environment where other married women become coded too. And that is not proper. This is why Paul would say, if a woman wishes to learn something, let her go to her own husband. Let her go to her husband. You're now seeing another reason behind why Paul would say this. And so, unfortunately, in vast proportions of the body, we've made it all about the servant leadership. The servant leadership is pointing everybody to themselves, not to Messiah the goal. We're going to look at these three words: sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable. What does it actually say in the Greek? If a servant leader is to be sober-minded, the word nephaleos or nephalios, it can mean to abstain from wine, either entirely or at least from its immoderate use. So on the surface level, it is speaking of, not being drunk all the time. But look at the meaning. This is actually what it's really getting at. Restrained in conduct, self-controlled, level-headed, circumspect, calm and collected in spirit, dispassionate. Dispassionate means that you're not driven by your emotions when you're triggered. You know, whether it be anger or sadness or whatever, your emotions do not rule over you. But this sober-minded is not just your emotions ruling over you, it's anything. Does anything rule over you? You know, does alcohol rule over you? Let's go there. Psychotropic drugs, weed, you know, what is it that's ruling over you? Or are you submitted to the Ruach of Elohim? Are you submitted, to accountability and to the Spirit? And so this is actually getting at someone that's in self-control, so that you have the ability to discern. Because if you're being led by your emotions or your drunken stupor, you're not actually able to critically think or to weigh things up, which is actually the role of remember what the Greek said about an episkope, someone that can look at a situation and give an appropriate action for the situation at hand. And if something is clouding your judgment, or you do not have a hold of your emotional state, you should not serve, because then you will damage everybody else in the process. We'll deal more with the drunkenness thing later. Self-controlled. The word sophron is a compound word, but it means of sound mind, sane in one's senses. Look at this: curbing one's desires and impulses, self-controlled and temperate. So again, level-headed. But you may think, oh, Michael, that's exactly the same as the previous word we've just read. There's a different nuance in this. Sophron is made up of two words in the Greek, of sozo and phren. Sozo means to save, look at this, to keep safe and sound, to rescue from danger or destruction. And phren means the midriff, diaphragm, or the parts of the heart. And so by extension, it means the mind, the faculty of perceiving and judging. See, do we not have Proverbs that says, guard your heart at all costs, for from it can the fountains of life come? It literally is the ability to take every thought captive. Guard your heart, guard your mind, take every thought captive and make it submissive to Messiah. And so this word here, sophron, has a slightly different nuance to this previous word, which means to be self-controlled in all aspects, whether it be emotionally, spiritually, or physically with, drinking drugs, for example. This word is really speaking about the ability to critically think and to guard and to not be led by every whim of doctrine or every thought that you think is the spirit in your mind. Slightly different nuance. Can you see how this may be essential from someone that serves the body? Respectable. Okay, what does respectable mean in the Greek? The word here is kosmios, which means orderly, well-arranged, decorous, seemly, and modest. The characteristics or qualities that evoke admiration or delight, an expression of high regard, respectable or honorable. What's very interesting about this word, the root word of it is cosmos, which literally means everything that you see that is created. That's the root word. The Greek behind this has the idea that everything, the creation is an orderly arrangement. The universe is orderly. It's, by the word of his mouth, all things hold together. And I've put here the finely tuned universe principle. If you want to look at, I geek out on things like cosmology and science and things like that, but there's a principle in science called the finely tuned universe principle. And basically what it says is that the universe is so finely tuned that if you were to even move like literally one electron out of an atom, existence would fall apart. That's how finely tuned our universe is. And they're saying, how can you not think that that is evidence of intelligent design? And so you see this concept being bandied around, atheism versus creation. But the point I want to give is that even the ancients understood this principle, that the creation, what they perceived as the universe, was so finely tuned. And that, from that base word, is what this word kosmios, respectable, means. And so can we say of ourselves that we are so well arranged and decorous, seemly, modest, that we're actually worthy of praise? Like I said, it's really hard to go through today's teaching and not go, oh man, we fall so short. I understand. So respectable in the English almost seems cheap. It's missing all of this. Like this actually shows someone that's extremely mature, very mature. And you look at them and you think, wow, that person has overcome. That person, like in the same way that we look at the Apostle Paul and we go, wow, they deserve the merit, so to speak. Can the same be said of us? And if not, are we on that trajectory? So an overseer must be above reproach, husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. So not a lover of money, yes, it means that. It also means just, the general things of this life, like physical things, riches, admirations. Think of Yeshua's words, where are your treasures? Are they here on earth where moth and rust do destroy, or they're up in heaven, right? This is what Paul's really getting at. Quarrelsome, yeah, we know, again, why not quarrelsome? Let's go back to chapter 1. Because this is the stuff that breeds division in the body. So that's easy enough to understand. 3, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle. You may think that not a drunkard is fairly straightforward. In a way it is. The word paroinos, literally in the Greek, it means to stay near the wine. It's less someone that's a drunkard. It's a compound word. Para means close or directly beside, and oinos means wine. It literally means someone that's constantly near the wine, or the wine is constantly near them. In modern words, you could say, oh man, that guy's always got a bottle of beer in his hands. Now, is this just about wine? What does wine do? Or too much wine? Too much wine clouds your brain. It makes you drunk, obviously, in the moment. But look, as someone who's experienced time in the world, and as part of time in the world, I was a regular, fairly heavy drinker, as well as other things. What happens is that you have a fog that descends upon you. And it's not until you stop drinking for like a few days to a week or two that fog starts to lift. Like you get to a point, especially if you're a habitual drinker, that you'll wake up the next day, you're not hungover, but you're only running about 70% mentally, even though you don't feel hungover. Now, is it about the wine, or is Paul really getting at it's about the state of mind? What did we just read? Self-controlled, able to discern, able to weigh things up, being in control of your emotions. Here's another thing. When you wake up hungover, you like, I used to feel a lot more emotional. Like my emotions swayed me a lot more the morning after, which again, Paul says you can't be led to and fro by your emotional state. But I've put here, this is not just about wine. Pick your poison. Because wine is not the only way that will cloud your judgment, shall we say. You know, look, just because it's legal by Rome doesn't mean it's good for you. I'm still having to get used to the fact that here in Canada, cannabis is legal. In the UK, it's illegal. And I forget that sometimes, you know, and you just walk past and there's the marijuana shop. I'm like, oh, wow. But, you know, let's go to psychotropic drugs, which are being shrouded with the deception of medicine. What do all these things have in common? They change your state of mind. You are no longer able to think critically. You are under the influence of something else. And actually what you're doing is, of your own sovereign choice, you're saying, I will not be in the God-given state of mind that Yah has given me. I choose to be in something else, and I'm going to submit to that. Now, look, this is not about just having a glass of wine a week. Like, this is about habitual use that characterizes the person. It becomes part of their character. I've put here, this instruction applies to both in the marriage covenant, not just the men. And Paul will go on to say that essentially the standard for the men here to serve, the same has to be applied to the wife. Equal weights and measures. Because look, think about this. Ladies, if your husband is a drunkard, what does that force you to do? It actually puts you in a position where you actually have to usurp him. It forces you to pick up the pieces because your husband is, I don't know, drunk on the couch every day. And so you now have to, like, what headship are you getting as well? You know, because look, we read the woman's design is, it needs headship. It's prone to something. It's prone to deception. It's prone to usurping. And now your so-called headship is drunk all the time, or he's stoned all the time, or he's, you know, chowing down the psychotropic drugs, and you can't trust his judgment. Let's flip it the other way. Let's say, husband, you're sober, and your wife, again, pick your poison, drunk, stoned all the time, psychotropic drugs, basically not in the right frame of mind. Where do you have to go now to open up your emotional state? A wife should be a place of refuge for her husband. She, like, what? And again, let's remember the Shema. That, well, let's look at the curses of the fall. That the men have to go and toil. The women are part of the raising of the children. Well, think about the damage being done to the children when the woman raising them is actually out of her face all the time. Do you see how all this is what Paul's really getting at? It's not just about don't drink wine. It's about, are you of right mind? Are you sound in have a hold over you? Because if something has a hold over you, you're enslaved to something that clouds your thinking. And let's go right to the crux of it. If you cannot think critically and your mind is clouded all the time, it's actually going to hinder you be able to hear from the Ruach. Plain and simple. Truth will not be able to go in. And if by some chance it does go in, it cannot develop the deeper roots. Like, I've had to speak to people that are either, drunkards or stoners or on psychotropic drugs. And it's amazing how many times I have to repeat myself to them. Or they come to me a year later and they tell me this great big revelation they've had. And it's like, brother, sister, you learned this a year ago. What's going on? And so let's take it even further. It's actually going to hinder your spiritual growth. You will stay in a spiritual childlike state because the Ruach is not able to go through, and you won't be able to heed and apply counsel in your life because you're out of your face. Makes sense as to why we can't have servant leaders like that. Not violent. Yes, it can mean not punching people. It's probably not going to go well if you start punching the congregants in the face. But you can do it with your words as ways. I learned a new English word this week, pugnacious. The pugnacious means someone who's quarrelsome, eager or quick to argue, contentious, antagonistic. And actually, not only is the person themselves antagonistic or quarrelsome in nature, what the Greek is really getting at here is that someone that will act in a way to entice the other person to become quarrelsome or contentious, which is like, it adds a whole new nuance. Look, servant leaders in the body, have you ever found that you're presented with a situation and you're going, they need to hear the truth, but I need to say it in a way that's not going to cause them to flip out? Or who here has seen someone that they will say things in a particular way to rile the other person up on purpose so that then they can point the finger at them and say, well, look at how you're arguing and being contentious, yet they're the ones that actually orchestrated it. It's actually quite malevolent in nature. And Paul is saying a servant leader can't have this stuff to him. So yes, don't punch people in the face or slap them. Probably won't go well. Don't be quarrelsome with your words, but don't do things in a way where you're going to, you're going to cause them to become quarrelsome. Don't you dare point the finger. You riled them up. This is what Paul's really getting at here. Because if not, it shows that you lack integrity. It means you actually hate the person as well. And you're willing to crush them down to puff yourself up. And then you get to be all self-righteous. So if we're not to be drunkards and we're not to be violent and everything that means, what does it mean to be gentle? Does it mean to be airy-fairy and have a wet fish handshake and to be nice and fluffy? Because that's what you'll be told in a lot of places, more so on the Christian side. Epiakes, seemingly suitable, appropriate, equitable, fair, mild, gentle. Notice here, equitable. And I love this, not insisting on every right of letter of law or custom, yielding, gentle, kind, courteous, tolerant. This is within a legal context here, not within a Torah context. It's within a judicial context. Essentially what the Greek is getting at here is being all things to all men, or it's able to give the appropriate accountability in proportion to someone's maturity. This is why it's saying equitable, fair, mild, gentle, or hopefully it makes sense of this statement number 3 here within a judicial sense. It's like, look, I know the law says this, like the Roman law, I'm talking here, but, let's do this. A judge has the power to do that. And so in a Roman context, but here, this is about being able to give the appropriate accountability in proportion to someone's maturity. Let me use a really simple example. If your 2-year-old pees on my toilet seat, there will be accountability for both the parent and the 2-year-old. But it's going to look very different to the 2-year-old. But if the parent decides to pee on my toilet seat, that accountability is going to be in proportion with their hopeful maturity. It's going to look very different. You know, this is why parents are harder on teenagers than they are toddlers, because they're being able to be all things to all men. They're giving the approach, like accountability is still being given, but you're doing it in proportions to someone's maturity. And so just even when I'm doing the discipleship in the background or when I'm giving counsel, I have to be very aware of this, because two people may be going through the same struggle and two people may be needing the same accountability, but the way I give it to those two people may look very different. And that will be based upon them and their journey. This is why Paul says that the strong in the faith have to bear with the failings of the weak. Okay? And servant leaders in the body, you need this. You absolutely need this, because if not, what happens is that you can actually unwittingly allow bad behavior in the body because someone needs a rocket up their backside and you're just being nice. Oh, no, you're nice. You'll repent eventually. It's like, no, they need accountability. But then the other way that can swing is that you're needing to be gentle on someone and you've just smashed them. And then you cause all kinds of self-condemnation and guilt in that other person. And so again, how are you going to be able to do that? Well, you need discernment. And if you're constantly, on the booze or smoking the spliffs every night or chowing down the psychotropics, you're not going to have good discernment. And if you haven't got good discernment, you're not going to be able to be this to people. Let's continue. He must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. And so I've actually put here, being a husband or father makes you an overseer already. Paul is speaking about overseeing of the body here. But men, if you're a husband and or a father, you're already an overseer, just within your family unit. So everything you're reading applies to you. And those of you that, men that are still single, you will be one day, hopefully. So anyway, what does it mean to manage or to rule, depending on your translation? Proistemi, to set or place over. So it can be authority, but look at this, to protect or guard, or to care for and give attention to. So this is not only authority and protection, but it's nurturing. Why would Paul say in Ephesians 5 that husbands, you need to lay down your lives for your wives, as Messiah laid down his life for the assembly, but also going, helping them wash them in the water of the word and nurturing them. But you need all of it for it to be balanced. Not enough protection. Well, are you even a man? I will say this. But if you have just, authority in laying down the law, but no nurturing, are you even a man? It goes both ways. A scriptural, biblical man. Look at Messiah. Authoritative, guarded, but cared for. You need all of these to be what Scripture defines a man. And so whichever way you want to go, are you a man? The root word to this, proistemi, because it's made up of pro, which means before or above, and the other word is histemi, to cause or make to stand, to place, to put, to set. So husbands, in managing or ruling your house, you're causing it to actually stand. Think about how men are supposed to be a shadow picture of Messiah in the marriage. We know that Messiah, by your word, all things hold together. Men, does your word hold your household together? Because if not, you're not being a type and shadow of Messiah. Look at this. In the presence of others, in the midst before judges. Husbands, you're going to be held accountable for how you went about your headship. Did you have authority, but did you nurture? Because this house that you're causing to stand or tearing down, it will stand before Messiah. You will be judged for your works in the flesh, in this time domain. Look at this: to make firm, to establish, to keep intact, to escape in safety. Is your family safe? Can it withstand the barrage of darkness coming from the world? To set place or in balance. Is there balance in your house? Right? Because you need judgment, but you also need mercy. Do you see how this is actually quite a deep word, even in the Greek? Look at this: to be of a steadfast mind. Are your children and your wife steadfast, faithful, ready or prepared to stand? Doesn't Paul say that stand, resist against the adversary? He doesn't say attack it. He says resist, stand, make firm. Husbands, men, this is your job to your wives and your children. You're to equip them and nurture them to a place where they can stand, whether it be against this world or the office of adversary. And remember, you will be held for the judgment on this, ultimately. It's sobering. I know. Not only are you to do this, but you're to do it with all dignity. Now, does this mean to be like the British toffs and to lift up your chin? No. The word semnotes, the characteristic of a thing or person which entitles reverence and respect, dignity, majesty, and sanctity. Does your wife and do your children, men, look at you and go, wow? Or do they go, ugh? Or both, maybe? Do others look at how you're doing your headship and go, wow, I could learn a thing or two here? A manner or mode of behavior that indicates one is above what is ordinary and therefore worthy of social respect. Wow. This word semnotes is actually used of honor, purity, and even holiness. And this holiness is even used in terms of deity, by the way. Again, are you Messiah-like? And probity here. The quality of having strong moral principles such as honesty and decency. So not only are you to rule or manage your house well to cause it to stand, you're to do it with dignity. I mean, this is a really tall order. And again, I'm putting this teaching together this week, and it's hard not to look in the mirror and think, man, how much do we fall short of this? For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for the assembly of Elohim? The household, the family unit, I don't want to say it's the training ground, but if you can't do it in your house, you're not going to do it in the assembly, because the drivers will be exactly the same. And ultimately, both the dynamics within marriage and within a family house and the dynamics of the assembly, they both point to the millennial reign, Messiah and his bride, and what will eventually become the eternal family. You know, I've seen servant leaders in the body where their marriage is out of order, and it shows in their assembly. It shows in the assembly. Believe me, if there's issues going on within an assembly, you can almost 100% say that there's issues of usurping and improper headship going on in the leadership of those in their marriages. I can almost guarantee it. And when you start tracing it back and digging under the surface, lo and behold, he must not be a recent convert. The Greek here says someone newly planted, actually, that it uses the planting analogy. So now you've got overtones of the parable of the seed, right? And some was put on soil, some by the way, some by the path. And so I love the Greek here, recently planted. He may, or why can't he be a recent convert? He may become puffed up with conceit. Conceit is when you think way too highly of yourself. It's when you have almost like delusions of grandeur, like you're thinking you're way better than what. It's a form of pride. It's extreme pride. And they fall into the condemnation of diabolos. We'll get to that. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. And so let's look, I've seen this play out. Someone that's maybe too fresh, being put into a position of leadership, and it causes them to get into it, that the pride starts to well up in their hearts, and they go, well, I did this, and look at what I'm doing, and I. And they start to think of themselves more highly than they ought. Look, it doesn't always happen, but Paul's saying, if you're new to this, it's a lot more likely. But notice what he says, because being puffed up with pride or conceit causes you to fall into the condemnation of the devil. Now look at what he goes into. You must be well thought of by outsiders, non-believers, so that he may not fall into disgrace. This is actually a matter of witness to those that are outside. Remember what we covered in chapter 2, that we're to pray for our captors so that we can live out our faith in peace and be a witness to those outside. But if the servant leadership within that body is now, look, again, why do we have atheists and mockers now? Because this has been going on, unfortunately. Now, while this can be speaking of the actual diabolos, can mean, it's like in Hebrew, Satan. It can mean the Satan, right? The adversary, but it just means an adversary. Diabolos in the Greek, it means someone prone to slander, a slanderer, and a false accuser. Metaphorically applied to a man who, by opposing the cause of God or Elohim, may be said to act the part of the devil or to side with him. It literally means adversary, but the Greek adds this nuance that they're doing it with their slander. And this is where you have to understand what real slander is. And so here, again, I believe Paul, what he's trying to get at is the servant leadership. Look, they need to be above reproach. They've got to be well thought of by outsiders. Why? Because if not, it's going to cause slander against the body and ultimately against Messiah. Because remember what an overseer is. He's someone that you look up to as a goal because their goal is Messiah. Imitate me as I imitate Messiah, right? When servant leadership falls short, and I'm being nice here, it can be a terrible witness. I mean, look at the nonsense going on in the body. Like, seriously, you don't have to look far. It's a shame that we can easily look and, oh, here we go. Here's the thing, though. It can also give ammunition to those who will come from within and come against the servant leadership. Everyone misses this in this passage. Paul didn't. Look, because in verse 7, he's dealing with those outside, right? This is your atheist mocking, this servant leader has had 5 affairs with the women or whatever, right? This is what he's dealing with in verse 7. But in verse 6, I actually believe that Paul is addressing this dynamic. And it's like, because look, we're told that savage wolves will come from within, won't they? And here's the thing. If you have a servant leader that's starting to act unwisely, you're actually giving ammunition to the wolves. Because look, this is not about picking on servant leaders. Like, servant leaders will make mistakes. Deal with it. Actually deal with it. But, pray that the mistakes are, I don't want to say negligible, but that they're small and that they're not big, if that makes sense. Because if you're doing a big mistake, man, like, you're making our job harder. Because, like, don't be giving ammunition to those that are going to come against you. Because, I hope people hear where I'm coming from on this. Because there will be those that come against servant leadership or the body or even this community. And we do our best to not give those people ammunition. And so this is why the vetting has to be rigorous. It's not just about, we can't hurt the people. Yes, that's a big part, but Remember that the adversary, it says that he stands night and day before Elohim, accusing the brethren. Have you ever thought that the accusations may be correct? We always think of the adversary as a false accuser, right? But the more I look at it, I can guarantee you Hasatan is going, look at it, Elohim. Look, they're your people. Look, I'm not even having to do anything, and look at what they're doing. Like, we miss that. What if the accusations from Hasatan are actually correct? Look at them. Cheaters, fornicators, violent, culling the sheep, so to speak, muddying the waters. And that's before the adversaries even got in there. Deacons, likewise. So we've dealt with servant leaders. These will be the overseers, those that have authority and at the eldership level, the decision-making process, okay? Deacons, diakonos, it literally means an attendant, a servant, a waiter, one who executes the commands of another. So they're in this community, what we would call the helpers. So we have the leadership, the eldership, we have the servant leaders within the discipleship that, so you have eldership, servant leadership, but then we have those that are not necessarily eldership, but they walk beside the eldership and help, and help serve, for example, these are trusted people known by the eldership that are characterized by overcoming and repentance. And while they may not have a position of authority, they're trustworthy to help others through. And this is essentially what a deacon is. Unfortunately, Mystery Babylon has made a deacon the guy that greets you at the door going, there, being all nice. Meanwhile, he's slandering you behind your back. Can you believe? No. Think of, when the apostles say, it is not good for us to wait tables. Let us appoint those to take care of the needs of the body so that we can go about the business of being apostles. But what do they say? Let these be proved. And they go through a couple of, 2 or 3 requirements that basically they have to be spirit-filled. They must have been there from the beginning of Messiah. Like, basically, they're trustworthy. They've been vetted. So again, unfortunately, Mystery Babylon, anyone can become a deacon as long as you've got like a pretty or handsome face or a nice big beard and you've got a nice handshake. Oh, makes me sick. Sorry. They must hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. What does it mean to hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience? Let's deal with clear conscience first before we get to mystery of the faith. We actually covered clear conscience in part 1. 1 Timothy 1 verse 3. As I urged you, when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus so that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies, which promote speculations or arguments, divisions, rather than the building up of the house. This is what this word, stewardship, oikodomia, means. The building up of the house from Elohim that is by faith. Elohim's trying to build his house through the true faith. Now, the aim of this command, what? To prevent all this nonsense, is love that issues from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. A faith without hypocrisy, that is genuine, that is sincere, that is truthful, and that is unfeigned. And what did we say is the test, the litmus test of the true faith? It's not whether you know the Torah or whether you tick the Torah boxes. It's not whether you know the end of the book and that Messiah is salvation. It's not a knowledge-based faith. What is a sincere faith? Love, mercy, justice, the inside of the cup, not the outside. I'm going to say it plain and simple. I would rather deal with believers that cuss and smoke, but actually have a sincere heart, than those that don't smoke and cuss, but that they just leave a trail of destruction behind them. I'm being serious here. That may offend some people. It's like, again, I'm going to worry about the brother or sister's inside of the cup, because guess what? When that's being dealt with, the rest, it's an outcome. It's an outcome. And so, do we have a faith that actually shows the character of Messiah? Because if we're entertaining all these arguments and discussions and about doctrine, you know, Godhead, flat earth, names, you know, the nature of the fallen state, or like all this stuff, like, and we're doing it at the expense. Look, I love the topic of things like the wedding feast and even the Godhead, actually, but I'm not going to do it at the expense of repentance. You know, Curtis and I were having some brevity on this issue, and we were joking, saying that maybe we should just have a thing. I am not going to talk doctrine unless I can see repentance in your life, brother. And so, anyway, the point being, the deacons, we're not even talking overseers now. We're talking the stewards, the helpers. They don't even have an authority in the terms of decision-making in the process. They may have an authority over, you know, struggles and overcoming. But deacons, attendants, those who execute the commands of another, they must have a clear conscience. I've put here, modern society struggles with playing the long game. Why? Let them also be tested first. Then let them serve as deacons, themselves blameless. Paul's essentially saying, you know, all the attributes of a servant leader, an overseer, you need to see those in the deacons as well. And this is why I can't stand this idea that the deacon is the guy or the gal who just greets you at the front door and goes, the hymnals are over there and the lavatories are over here. And by the way, here have our denominational literature. Modern society struggles with playing the long game. And we as a Western society, because of our give it to me now, our need to be satiated instantly, we're not willing to our folly to play the long game in testing someone. We give our trust far too easily. And so what happens is that people can be put in positions of authority or servanthood before they're ready for it, because we're not willing to play the long game. Because look, someone may seem really, really nice for the first 10 minutes, the first hour, the first day, man, even the first few months. Walk with them a year, then see where they're at. Seriously, walk with them a year. This is why, for those that are going to serve in the discipleship side of the ministry, We actually have a flat out rule. You can't be a servant leader in a stable unless you've been in discipleship at least a year. And that's us being generous. At least a year. That's providing that they're actually humbling themselves and being vulnerable to their accountability. That's if things are good. Anyway. And so we need to do things Messiah's ways. His house, his order. Their wives, likewise. So everything you've just read about overseers, about the deacons need to be like the overseers. So do their wives. You know, unfortunately, we've seen good men that would be fantastic servants, but because of their wives, they cannot serve. And the same happens the other way around. There are good women out there, but because their husbands are shirking their headship and they've got enough issues going on at home, it's actually taken them out of servanthood. It happens both ways round. Because, you know, on the woman's side, she's not getting the proper spiritual headship, so the issues that come with that. On the other side, the man is dealing with too much stuff at home, so he can't actually do anything. And so it doesn't leave us with a lot of people. And so, again, you know, this is why the discipleship side of things and working and the tilling of the ground is critical. Both on the male and female side. The wives likewise must be dignified. We covered this word. There's dignity from, you know, that it has to be above what is normal. You know, worthy of social respect, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. Again, we covered what sober-minded meant, that it goes way beyond just, you know, if you're had too much of the bottle. It's someone who's in full control of their emotional state so that they can discern properly, so that they can then give appropriate counsel or judgment even, appropriate consequence. And then on top of that, they need to be able to do it in proportion to someone's maturity. So for those that serve, it's essentially saying their marriage needs to be in order. That's what it's saying. Let deacons each be the husband of one wife. Again, no polygamy, guys. Managing their children and their households well. Again, have your house in order. For those who serve well, not those who serve, those who serve well as deacons gain a good standing for themselves and also great confidence in the faith that is in Messiah Yeshua. And so what's this good standing? Is it so that they can look at themselves and go, well, look at me. I'm actually doing this thing pretty damn well. I mean, wow. Have to stand before the judgment seat of Messiah? Again, those who wish to oversee seek a noble task. What is this noble task that we're going to have to count the cost on, but that something genuine and proved may come out of it? Do you think that that may be pleasing in the king's eyes? Interesting, huh? Allusions to the judgment seat of Messiah there. And also great confidence in the faith. Again, is this just, I'm confident? Is it, I can speak well publicly? Again, what's the Greek actually saying here? Parasia. Look at this. Freedom in speaking, unreservedness in speech, openly, frankly, without concealment, without ambiguity or circumlocution, without the use of figures and comparisons. Now look at this. A use of speech that conceals nothing and passes over nothing. Think accountability. You know something's wrong, you're going to bring it to the surface. And the reason you can do that is because fearless confidence, boldness, assurance. It's essentially the ability to say what is needed and not necessarily what is wanted. It's this thing of being firm. It's the accountability side of speaking. It can't look, who here has actually found that they've needed to hold someone accountable, but they've actually been too cowardly to do so? Look, guilty as charged. I'm guilty of this in the past. And so this is what it means to have great confidence. So when Paul says that those who serve as deacons, remember the deacons, that they're not the overseers. If you serve well as a deacon, you may actually gain a good standing at the judgment seat of Messiah and great confidence in the faith, i.e. the ability to speak boldly without fear of, holding people to account. Because here's the beauty of this. You can go from a deacon to an overseer. Do you think you're going to need some boldness, some kahunas, so to speak, to be able to say what is right? Not what is nice, what is right. Do you think you're going to need that if you're going from deacon to overseer, from helper to servant leadership? Absolutely. I hope to come to you soon, but I am writing these things to you so that if I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of Elohim. It's his house. This is how we ought to behave, which is the assembly of Elohim, a pillar and a buttress of the truth. And so the question I ask is, are we a pillar and a buttress to the truth? We're supposed to be the light of Messiah shining in this dark world, because our King is not here on earth right now. Is our King coming through us and the light that we are shining? Are our marriages a light of what it means to be in covenant? Are our assemblies a light to what it means to be in covenant? This is why we have these instructions from Paul. Great indeed, we confess, is the mystery of godliness, who was manifested in the flesh, vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations, believed on in the world, and taken up in glory. Now, let me ask an obvious question. Who is this verse clearly speaking of? Who was manifested in the flesh? Who was vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, and proclaimed among the nations, right? It's Messiah, our King. So this verse is clearly speaking of Messiah. What's really interesting, there's a debate going on in academia. Certain Greek manuscripts, instead of the word who, which, by the way, is a masculine singular, instead of the word who, which is ho, if I'm not mistaken, it has the word theos, which the equivalent is Elohim in Hebrew or God in English, right? It literally, so there's certain manuscripts that actually say, great is the mystery of godliness, Elohim who was manifested in the flesh, which is very interesting. Now, I don't want to make this a verse about the Godhead, as much as I enjoy the topic. But what I want to go down is, again, is Messiah in us? Is the light of Messiah in us? I mean, think of the mystery of godliness. Let me phrase it this way. What do the angels long to look into? What are the angelic hosts right now looking down? What are they learning? How can the light of Messiah be manifested through fallen flesh? It's one thing, Messiah, Elohim in the flesh, coming into the world. But once he ascends, how is Messiah going to be manifested in the flesh? Do you see? Are they learning? Is this why it's vindicated by the Spirit? Think what it means to vindicate something. Elohim is saying, do this, and I'm going to do it through fallen human beings. Again, think about vindicating his choice of the bride. I mean, this is how deep it goes. And all this is being witnessed by the messengers. Is Messiah in us? Are we helping? Are we part of this mystery of godliness, of Messiah being manifested in the flesh and revealed? Are we, as Paul was saying a second ago, a pillar and a buttress of the truth through being an assembly that knows how it ought to behave? I believe, Paul, that people want to make this passage an argument about, theos and Godhead and Trinities. And is there a deeper insight here that the Apostle Paul, who knew a lot of mysteries, shall we say, understood the depths of the plan of redemption at a level that just absolutely baffles me? Do you think he's maybe getting at something deeper here? What are the messengers learning? Not only are we being a light to the nations, but are we being a light to the messengers? We always make this about me, Rome, 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 Rome. Well, what about the angelic host? Are they not part of the plan of redemption? Anyway. Again, like I said, it's very hard to go through a teaching like this without feeling the mirror and the light shine upon you and make you feel about this small and make you think, man, how far do we fall short? This is not about condemning us and how much we fall short, because look, we're all going to stumble. We're all going to fall short. At some point, if you're going to take a snapshot of someone's life, it's not going to. The question is, have we been given principles, guidance, and a pattern to follow that's going to help us to stay out of trouble as much as possible? Because Elohim did that at the fall of man, remember? He gave us toil. But is that the only thing he gave us to help us with our fallen state? Did he give us a pattern, a discipleship? Did he give us good laws, good principles that if we actually just were to listen and understand and not bring the filth of Mystery Babylon and of Rome into his body, do you think that maybe we could go through this a bit easier? And I don't mean to be comfortable, but I mean to have the fruit of his spirit manifesting, to have the joy that surpasses, the peace that surpasses all understanding, the good fruit. Anyway, let's stop here. Amen.